our lovely speakers. And guys, just so you know, there are microphones in both aisles, so if you'd like to ask a question personally, then please feel free to get up and ask a question there. Just start making cues behind the microphones. Don't be shy. When's the next time you're going to get to ask any of these guys a question? Come on. But people have been asking questions all day to the Twitter account and also via emails, so I'll start off with some of those questions first. And the first one is actually from James Croft in the audience, and this one goes to Raphael from Flipboard, and he just wanted to know, why did Flipboard decide to make their Android version exclusive to Samsung? Thought I'd start with an easy one.
You know, this is an ongoing process, and I would like not to comment on that.
That's fair enough, yeah. There's a couple of questions in there that I looked at and thought, that's going to get someone fired or shot. But we'll move along. Now, Matt, I'll throw this to you. Matt Ricks, I'm already guessing the answer for this one here, but someone also wants to know, what are your Android numbers like?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, the Android version just came out like a week ago, and I don't have a clue. I haven't actually looked at the numbers yet. I actually have no idea. They could be good, but...
Yeah. So it's Christmas all over again.
It's going up the Android charts.
Yeah.
I know that right now, but...
It's not as if they're not live. It's not as if the sales figures aren't live either for Android. They're like up to date and live now.
Well,
right?
actually,
it's just that Matt hasn't looked. Is the problem.
Yeah, I should talk about the way the Android version was made was actually really cool. There's a company in Canada called Noodle Cake, and they basically have figured out a way to get Objective-C running on Android. So it's literally my iPhone game running on Android. So people always say like, wow, this is such an accurate port. It's because it is the game running on Android. And so they have the figures, and I haven't even bothered to ask them yet. I figured they'll tell me when things are either really good or really bad, so I'm just kind of waiting that out.
Fair enough then. This question's for Winter. Just make sure you've got a mic nearby. The question is basically, your app relies on the, I guess, the technical ability of so many forum admins out there to install your plugin and actually know how to use it as well. Has that been an issue, having that much support across that many different platforms?
Yeah, it was a lot of issues to support. We support more than 7 forum systems, so now that we have to hire full-time engineers to to just work on the server side, so we have 2 guys full-time taking care of all the plugins for different forum systems. So for us, it is a nightmare to maintain all of those.
Fair enough. I can imagine. I mean, I run 2 forums myself, and I don't know how to tie my shoes, so I can only imagine some of the support calls you get. This is more of a general question for the entire panel. You're all very successful iOS app developers. Some of you have touched on this, but there was a question in the audience from, I should give him credit, from Chanda, asking what you think of Windows Phone and whether you'll be developing more often for Windows in the future.
So I don't know if anybody else here has released anything on Windows Phone. You have?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you mind if I start? So we did a Windows Phone port of Pano. It was faster to do than the Android port, which was fun. I mean, I have some experience with Visual Studio and stuff like that. If you're interested in terms of sales figures, it's a really, really small marketplace. Android has lots of users, and a lot of them don't buy apps or aren't willing to pay for apps. Windows Phone users seem to be willing to pay. There's just very, very few of them right now. So the process to do it was interesting and neat, but it's a tiny, tiny fraction of our user base and our sales. It doesn't really compare to iOS or to Android.
Can I ask Dave to answer this as well, just because we've had this discussion over the last few days?
Yeah, we're doing a Windows port of our Aero Display client anyway, just so you can run it on your desktop. So, we also want to be compatible with tablets and so on. So supporting Windows 8 or 7 is a logical extension of that, and we'll probably do it. But when we do these ports, our usual strategy is we don't want to do it until somebody offers to pay us to port it and like give them an exclusive period. Not to cut onto your, I can't talk about this thing, but like Samsung's one of those companies that'll do that. Microsoft's been doing it, and we're waiting for that.
Okay. So you're waiting for the big Redmond bag of money to arrive. Fair enough then. This, I think, this question is directed at Igor, I'd imagine. But you mentioned some cross-promotion of apps. Have you looked into any app integration or curation systems like Yogi Play? I'm not familiar with that, so if you could explain that as well.
I'm not familiar with that either.
Fair enough
Unity
then.
Play?
Well, as a more general question, have you looked into any other forms of cross-promotion or any of the other
No,
forms?
I mean, there are some systems for a formal cross-promotion, and there are some initiatives among the sort of the independent developer community to create their own cross-promotional system, and that's something that would be very interesting to see come to fruition, but we've generally done one-offs with some apps that we like.
Okay. Now, those microphones are still looking pretty lonely out there in the audience, so please someone line up behind those microphones so I'm not the only one asking questions. Let's see from... Oh, this is from Matt Roberts, and this is back to you, Dave, asking... Your app, and again, this is one of those things, I don't know how much you can answer here, but your app Air Dictate was pulled from the App Store on fairly questionable grounds, with Siri being used to power your dictation function in the app as the reason. There are now a number of apps that do similar, including my own app. Oh, there you go. Vocal, which is still in the App Store. Do you think that there's, in this instance, Apple's policies have been inconsistently applied? And would you even comment on that in public? I don't know.
I may have insulted somebody in the app process there over at Apple, but I can't swear to that. I know that a lot of their policies have been inconsistently applied, and this is probably one of them, but there may be a specific thing we were doing that was offensive. There's nobody to talk to and find out, so it's hard to know.
What is the follow-up when something like that happens? I mean, it was discussed a little bit yesterday, but if you do get the app rejection, I mean, does it help when you're a little bit more well-known? Do you think the phone call gets picked up a little bit quicker?
It does help, and you know, over the years we get emails from particular people in worldwide developer relations, and we get to know a few names and get some contacts, and those help in some cases, but you know, we weren't selling that much Air Dictate, and when it got yanked, the sales of our other apps increased by an amount greater than the amount we lost from Air Dictate, so we're sort of riding on that, and it's kind of fun.
So was that based on what, just blog post outrage out there that Apple, yeah?
Yeah, just a blog post.
Fantastic, cool. And we have a question from the audience.
I think all of you guys at some stage have obviously talked about the successes you've had, and many of you have also mentioned some of the failures that you've had, and in turn in the successes that you've had, just how hard you've had to work to achieve those. And I suppose my question is as a software developer, at what point do you say this thing is a failure and pull the pin, as opposed to saying, no, this is successful, I just need to keep slogging really, really hard on this? How do you draw that line?
So I've had a few failures, and kind of my guideline for this is when you stop wanting to actually use the product, that's when I consider it to be kind of a failure. Because if you're really into the product and the project itself, then you're going to keep working on it as kind of a labor of love and still hoping that people are going to find it. But if the sales aren't there and you're finding that you're not using the product, that's usually my sure sign to kind of just bail on it. And I've had a couple of products that way, where it's just like I was working on them and I thought there was going to be a market for them, and then 6 months down the road I realized, well, I'm not even using this thing anymore, so I just pull it off the store.
Yeah, we released an app that was mostly my own sort of little labor of love after some of the initial Pano stuff died down. And it was a self-photography app. The idea was, this is back in the iPhone 3G, 3GS days when there was no front camera. And so it used face detection to sort of determine when you're in frame and take the photo for you. And it was called Self-Image, which I still think is a super clever name. But very soon after that, they released new hardware, and it sort of obviated the need for that kind of app. And I certainly didn't find myself using it anymore. And that seemed like a pretty good time to sort of, I mean, we were happy it was feature complete, and that was sort of end of life for that.
Okay. There's been quite a few questions on Twitter actually about in-app purchasing that hasn't really been mentioned by any of the speakers here today. We did touch on it a little bit in some of the podcasts, but have any of you guys had experience with in-app purchasing, and is it evil? That seems to be the kind of theme of the questions.
Yeah, so for all our games, including our first one, we have in-app purchase hats. They don't do anything, they're like 99 cents per hat. And most people don't have a big issue about this, but every once in a while we'll still receive an angry email from someone saying that they've never played any of our games and they never will because they saw that that had in-app purchases. That's just one of the things that's kind of pushing us towards the free thing, because it seems to us like people will accept free with in-app purchases now, but paid with in-app purchases, no matter how harmless, is just an increasing negative sentiment towards it for some reason.
Yeah. Do you think, do you think customers will look at that popular in-app purchasing list that appears in the store? I mean,
That's what the angry emailers say, yes. They see the in-app purchases on the most popular list, and then they just say, I hate in-app purchases, I will never buy any of your games, and then usually some other random insult, but that's the crux of it.
it is the internet. All right. Yep, on this side.
G'day, my name's Jared. I'm from a company called Big Investments, and over the last, since November, so 6 months, we've created 150 apps. So a bit of a shotgun approach, but also we've had a lot of young people come to us with great ideas, and we've been able to throw those together pretty quickly with our team of 14 people. We've had a mixed result, of course, as you would expect. But first question, I've just got a couple of quickies. Firstly, from Matt Rix's comment earlier on price of 99 cents to $2.99. Perhaps I can get some other people's comments about their thought on pricing. And Matt, whether you want to elaborate on whether $1.99 is indeed just out of the equation.
So let me see if I can actually make this make sense. I don't know if this is exactly answering your question. So this is the way I like to think of it. The difference between 99 cents and everything else is like, if you go to a dollar store and you want to buy something from a dollar store and you buy something there, if you come home and you buy like a shovel or something from a dollar store. I don't know if you can get a dollar shovel, but whatever, right? So you buy a shovel from a dollar store, you come home, use it for 2 days and it breaks. You're like, whatever, it was a dollar shovel, right? If you go out to some expensive premium store and you buy a shovel and it breaks after 2 days, you're like, what happened? Like I bought this expensive shovel and it broke. Like that's a big problem. And so 99 cents is the cheapest you can buy an app while still paying for an app. And so if that 99-cent app isn't very good, it's like whatever, right? Like that was the cheapest app I could buy, basically. But at the moment you're spending anything other than 99 cents, you're buying a premium app, you're buying an expensive app, and all of a sudden if that app breaks or that app doesn't satisfy whatever need you have, that's like a huge problem. And so there's actually a huge difference between 99 cents and everything else because of that reason, because it's the cheapest you can pay for an app. So I don't know if that kind of answers the question.
Adding to that a little bit, from our data, we track numbers on sales and price changes and such. There's almost no difference between $2 and $3, except one of them gets you more money in your pocket per sale. So.
Can I just add to that? Since our apps are productivity apps and it's kind of different, there's not such a saturated market, we intentionally set a price high. One of the things is that our apps are installing video drivers on your computer, and you kind of want a level of stability. And the high price creates an expectation that it's going to be safer than if we made it cheaper. We sell a lot more copies probably, but on the other hand, one of our developers did an app called ISSH, and when he's raised his price from $5 to $7 to $10, in each case, the number of units that he sold actually increased.
Dave, just while I've got you, where do you see TV apps going in the near future?
TV apps?
Yep. Any thoughts on what they might do for the economy of apps?
You mean like an app store opening up on the Apple TV?
Yeah, and also obviously Samsung want that market.
I don't think sales on Google TV are very much, but we'd be really excited if Apple would open up an Apple TV store. I mean, you can write an app and run it on an Apple TV that's been jailbroken, but you can't really sell that. It's not a market. But it's kind of cool that it's all there and ready. It's just waiting for Apple to pull a switch and create an input device.
Does anyone have an idea as to, or a vision as to whether that's going to be, sooner rather than later?
I don't know. What do you think? We don't know. So it's kind of, I could see Apple doing it, but I mean, I'm in the productivity market, so I don't see much benefit for me. But for the games guys, I think that's an awesome market to open up. Whether Apple's going to do it, we'll see. If they come out with that mythical, magical Apple TV that's going to solve all of our problems in the living room, awesome. But I'm not holding my breath for it.
Sure. Thanks, guys.
You need a controller. That's the, like, if it's going to be used for games, it's got to have a controller, because you can't use the thing to play games, right? So if they're going to come out with an Apple TV, it's got to have a controller or something like that. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Apple will make a game controller for the Apple TV, which would be amazing, but
Samsung's going.
No, you have your iPhone and you have your iPad, and
yeah,
and if the most, I mean, if they'll do anything, they'll probably do a Kinect type of a controller, but they're not making a physical controller for sure.
Controller, yeah. But if they did, I mean, I'd like to think that that would be really successful because they're already eating into the typical mainstream console market like crazy. Maybe they should do that. I don't know. It would be awesome. So.
We'll just go over to this microphone.
I think my question follows on to the previous one. What are you guys held back by from Apple? Like what is Apple not, what do you feel like Apple's not giving you that would enable you to make better games, better apps? And then the flip side to that question is, what are you afraid of? What's Apple going to bring out in 6 weeks' time that's going to potentially screw you over?
It's impossible to experiment. The App Store is so hard to experiment on. Just because, 7 days to put something else new that you want to dabble in or something. And then also all the App Store rules and things like that. It's just really hard to experiment. So I think Steve Jobs maybe just expects everyone to be like him and just know what to do without experimentation, but we're not, so.
So in our case, there have been rumors about Apple including built-in panorama stuff with their OS forever. And so every new, iPhone announcement, WWDC, we kind of wait on the edges of our seats. The flip side to that is, we've talked to some of the people who do HDR apps and things like that, and their sales have never been better since Apple included that, because for all the users who have phones that don't get the feature, this is now a thing they know about. So, I mean, it's sort of a dangerous cliff to be standing on the edge of, but I think, that's something we're apprehensive about, but hopeful as well. I mean, it could end up being the best thing that ever happened to us.
So I actually have a pretty technical answer to your question. What I like to see.
That's good. Technical's good.
So API-wise, I would love to have CA Mesh Transform, obviously, which is just how Apple does, for example, the page curl in iBooks. We spend a lot of engineering effort in doing the flip as perfect as possible. And then the second thing would be API to web core. So right now the only way to interact with web views in iOS is UI web view, and yeah, that's it. And you guys probably know the pain of UI web view when you look at your all your crashers that you have assembled in Hockey app. And then there's half of it is just web core crashers. And you can't do anything there to fix that. So those two things are API requests.
So for games, discoverability on the charts. There are 3 types of games right now. There's games in the top charts. There's games with a big major feature. And there's games that are free so they can still have that viral, pass it on nature. And all the other games may as well not even exist on the App Store, to be honest.
Good answers, guys. Thanks.
And back to this microphone over here.
Hey guys, I'm Robert, and I'm a spare time iPhone developer. this is a question for the general panel because I'm sure you've all asked yourself this question at some stage. When you have a great idea for an app and you sort of nut it out and get it designed and get it built, and then you sort of pitch it to people to see what their feedback is, and they come up with all these great ideas, and you're like, oh, well, I really want to put these in the app before I release version 1.0. Where and when do you draw the line of, well, I need to get this out as it is, as opposed to, well, I'm just going to keep building and building and building and never release version 1?
So for us, our first app was ShipFinder, and there's two other people in Pinkfruit, the company, Mark and Jody. And if they had it their way, the app still wouldn't be out today. And so I'm kind of the devil inside the company. I mean, I will release something I'm not a designer, it's quick, it's dirty, it achieves what I want it to do. Hey, it's ShipFinder, it can track ships. If it can do that as a bare minimum, its minimum feature set, then great. So my philosophy is get it out and get it out quick, because getting out something is better than not getting out anything at all. Now, I know a lot of the guys here completely disagree with that, but that has worked for me personally.
And I'm sort of in the same boat. My kind of like soft rule is, what can I build in 75 to 90 days? Because you don't know if you're going to have a successful product. You might have a mildly successful product. You might have a really giant successful product. But I'd rather find that out in 3 months than in 6 months or 12 months. Because if the product isn't successful in that 1.0 or the 1.1, then it might be time to move on to the next thing. And you're not going to lose nearly as much money in dev time and design work if you're getting that 1.0 out in a decent time frame. And 75 to 90 days seems like the safe bet for me. I think games might be a little bit more difficult with that, but I don't know anything about games.
You know how I told you the story about the Japanese people and Kodawari. So it's really important to get the details right, sure. But sometimes good is just good enough. So ship it.
Maybe I can add on that too. I think the success or failure is not really depends on the features you have. It's the apps itself, the ideas of the apps. So if you can get your apps out faster, get more feedback from the users, I'm sure you'll get more confident whether to continue use or not. So it's best to fail fast and know what you need to be successful.
Yeah, I think Dave said, a great way to get featured is to look at the smallest set of features you can include in your app to solve a problem. And I mean, I think we take a lot of those cues from Apple. And you start with something that's great and focused, and you iterate and you add features. And that's certainly what we did. I mean, our first release of Pano was maybe 30 to 45 days from like start to finish. But that was a very different app from the one that's in the store today. It was limited in resolution. It didn't have a lot of the more advanced algorithmic stuff, but it solved a problem, and it was, polished for that. So I'm definitely a proponent of, do something small and focused, and have it be great at that, and add things over time.
I think the conversation going on inside, like internally, is like person A is saying, should we release it now so that we can find out sooner if people actually want this? And person B is saying, well, if we release it now, we won't actually know because it's not actually ready, so like it won't be a good product to judge by, right? So really what you're trying to do is basically just find out if people want it. I mean, if you knew like 100% that a product was going to be extremely popular when you released it, nobody would complain and nobody would criticize you if you took 2 years to build it. So what you want to do, in my opinion, is you want to just try to build, I think it was talked about with somebody, maybe it was yesterday, you build like a PowerPoint that like mocks the app. And then you put the PowerPoint in front of somebody and have them like click around the app in the PowerPoint. So like you did that in like 5 hours and you found out if your mother can actually use the app. So.
For games, it's just some sort of horrible nightmare world where you have to decide what opinions are good and what you should ignore, and I don't know. Anyone have any opinions on this?
I would just say a lot of it depends on money. If you're a funded company, it would be fantastic to have 8 engineers working for a year and make a really complete product and have the first impression that's just fantastic. I'd love to get there. But you know, we're bootstrap financed and we've got other apps to work on, so we typically have 1 to 3 engineers work on something for a few months. Maybe we're at the long end of the scale for how long we wait to put something out, but it also depends on the app. We've done things that took 3 weeks and felt that they were finished.
Yeah, I mean, I just finish and say that I think focusing on one thing that makes the app different from the others and just getting that out without all the extra, you know, features and stuff, and then seeing whether it works or not, because that's the core of the app or your game. And that's enough. The sooner you can get it out, the better, because the moment you start thinking, oh, should I add that, should I add that, it just ends up being never released. And that's way worse than releasing with too little.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Oh, and over here?
Sure. I just have another question about overcoming that problem of discoverability. And say for someone like myself who might do okay in the Australian store but is trying to break into the US store, and particularly interested in ideas of what you think the future is going to be like. Some of you guys touched on the cementing of the rankings and how difficult that is to overcome. And I mean, I'm sort of interested in things beyond the obvious of review sites and, you know, social media and all that sort of stuff. And I did ask the question earlier via Twitter about integrating sort of third-party modules or discoverability and curation systems like, well, I mentioned Yogi Play, which is a startup for children's apps, where I work predominantly in children's apps. And of course, one of the issues with children's apps is parents trying to find good content. They're concerned about privacy issues and all these sorts of things. So something like a Yogi Play, which you download an app that integrates with them and it recommends other apps, and they've gone through a process of review outside of Apple's review by educators or by parents. And I'm just wondering if you think that those sorts of solutions might solve the problem for developers trying to break in. So it's a question.
So I've been talking to Yogi Play people, and I think it's a great idea. It's definitely, you know, unless you're in the top charts in any category, it's really hard for anyone to find your app. And there are different people trying out different things, from sort of the promotional 3 app a day type of things to things that are specific to, you know, a group of people like parents looking for apps for kids. I'm sure Apple must be cooking something or thinking about it, but I don't think anyone has really cracked that problem yet. So maybe some of you, instead of creating apps and, you know, competing with 5 million people out there, focus on creating something for discoverability. That's like the, you know, finding your blue ocean, finding something that's not as crowded yet, and shining there.
I think a lot of it has to do with what Kepa was talking about in his talk, where, like, yeah, I mean, it would be great to have those kind of discovery tools that maybe make a network, but I find a lot of those always end up turning into places where, like, tons of apps are. Like, you really need a lot of curation of those apps, or else it's kind of worthless. And so you need to do what Kepa was talking about, where you start small and you build one product at a time, and you build up, eventually you build up a really solid brand of people who are fans. And I think in the children's space, I imagine you're familiar, but Toca Boca, like, their apps are absolutely fantastic, and they have, like, a consistent style, consistent brand, and you know when you're getting a Toca Boca app that it's going to be a fantastic app. And now I've bought, like, all of them for my son because I know what I'm getting with the Toca Boca app. And so you really just need to create that thing where now I know I'm going to buy pretty much everything they make because of that kind of relationship I have with them now and that trust I have in their brand. And sometimes, you know, the first app you come out with, that's not going to happen, but eventually, if you're known for a certain kind of quality, that will eventually lead to people finding your apps.
So in the App Store, you maybe notice if you search for Flipboard, it doesn't just say Flipboard, it says Flipboard, your social magazine. And that's really to optimize the search results. it's not the same string that shows up on the Springboard, right? So those are two completely different things. So you can play there with keywords. There's this really amazing Chester-based calculator, Der Rechner, from a cool US design agency that everybody and his mom talked about a couple of months ago, and so I downloaded it, installed it, used it, but it didn't really integrate in my daily just flow of calculating things all the time. So it was sitting there on screen 110 on my Springboard in a folder, and I totally forgot about it. So next time when I used Spotlight, I searched for calc, and then Der Rechner showed up, and I was like, what did just happen? Because it says Rechner up. And so apparently in their name, it says Rechner, but in the App Store name, they name it Rechner, your calculator or something. So every time I search for the iOS calculator, Rechner would show up. So that's definitely something how you can play. And I love how this guy just in his app description just entered like Flipboard. So, yeah.
We'll move across to this side.
Thanks, guys. Today's been great. We've heard a lot of different experiences and a lot of different approaches to other platforms. We've heard from people like Winter, who has quite a decent business on Android. And then we have people like Sean and Mysterious Trousers, who seem very deliberately iOS only at the moment anyway. I'm curious to hear from the panel, what is a good reason to go cross-platform? One of the sentiments that struck me today was when Kepa said, don't waste time on updates, spend your time on your next game. Should you not waste time going cross-platform and spend time on your next iOS app? Or is there a good reason to go cross-platform? And is there ever a good reason to architect for cross-platform from day one?
You'd always just pay someone to do your port for you.
Yeah, don't waste your time going cross-platform.
Always go
platform. Yeah. Well, so the way I see it, and I think it's different for different apps, but you will not make money on anything other than iOS. So if you have a very successful iOS app, then it makes sense to go cross-platform. Not so much for the money you'll make, but for the brand awareness. And I think that's the only reason why you would go cross-platform. Another reason is sort of, okay, there's so many iOS developers and it's hard to break through on iOS platform, and you're kind of betting that one day Windows will be big and you're going to make your entry into Windows platform now that no one is there, and you'll be the #1 app on Windows and make, $50 a day or less. But eventually, that will get better. So that's my point of view, but I'm sure other people have different ideas.
So, we're not extremely money driven. So it basically just comes down to the fact that we just don't care to please people that don't have taste. And
Hands up if you've got an Android phone on you.
Yeah, that too. No, actually, to his point, developing for Android and 10 million different devices there, it's just a nightmare. So it doesn't make you money, it's a nightmare,
So I'll throw out some reasons to do cross-platform, and it's not for the money. You're not going to make enough on the cross-platform sales to make up for the work that you could have put into new features on iOS or new apps. But you may have other goals with your company. You may be doing contracting, and you may need to make the point that your contracting services are cross-platform because a lot of brands need their stuff to be cross-platform, even though it won't make money. If you're doing enterprise apps that are going to be deployed by IT departments, you got to do cross-platform. And finally, if your product is your company rather than your apps, and you plan to get acquired, you may want to make the point that you're a cross-platform technology company. On the other hand, if you want to get acquired and then not have to do Android apps, don't do Android apps.
Can I also, like outside of the store, do those comments that people saying of Android owners saying, where's my Android version of this app? Like, I can't believe you're all snobs, blah, blah, blah. Does that actually filter back at all to sales, or no? No one cares?
We get emails every day from people paid by BlackBerry to send a templated email. Please make a playbook version of Doodle Jump because there are people there. You'll make tons of money on it, and I don't even know what. I even got one email. They're all the same, and one said, "Dear, insert developer name here." So.
For me, I look at cross-platform stuff the same way I do like features. If it's not a feature I'm going to use, I'm not going to implement it. And if it's not a device I don't use, I'm not going to implement it. And that's just me as a solo developer, which I think probably applies to a lot of people here.
One last thing for games. If Steam counts as cross-platform, yeah, go for Steam.
And to kind of answer your question about the development and planning ahead for it, because if it is something you do want to do as kind of a brand, we didn't start off with it, but then in our later versions of our apps, we did plan for it. And so our apps all use this back-end web services, and they all share the same web services. So we've saved on the back-end development, but not the client-side development. You know, they're all written in their native languages. We're not using any sort of cross-compilers or whatever. We are using the native languages, but we are saving resources on the back-end, and that really does work, so plan ahead for that.
Thank you.
And to Lauren?
Hi, guys. I'm interested to know how personally you take reactions to your work and the opinions of your users. Say, for example, you hear from a user who bought your app, let's say early on, and then maybe they used it for a while and they don't use it anymore, or they never used it at all. Do you just think, well, hey, I got their money, or do you take that personally, or how do you react to that?
I'm not allowed to reply to emails from people because I get angry. So that's down to Mark and Jody because I do really take them personally. And you're going to, it's a piece of your own work, so yeah, I'm not allowed.
Did you ever see that Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back at the end of the movie when Jay and Silent Bob went through the phone book and found all the people on the internet forum that were saying bad things about their movie, went to their house and wanted to punch them in the face? That's how I felt when I was answering my own support email because I'm really close to my products. And so when someone is emailing me and telling me my product is useless because it doesn't support Box.net or some other obscure service that's not Dropbox, it really angered me. And so kind of how I got around that was I outsourced a lot of my support so I didn't have to deal with those sort of issues. But conversely, if I'm working with something else that's not necessarily my product and someone's saying something bad about it, like I did some support work in the past for other companies, that didn't bother me because it wasn't my baby. So it's really hard if it is your baby to kind of hear someone saying really not nice things about it. I wish I was a stronger person and didn't want to assault them, but so is the way I am.
Every once in a while, you'll get an email about your game from someone essentially saying that it's dog shit. But I find it's really handy to actually ask why, because you'd be surprised if you're willing to put up with an initial bad email, you can dig a little deeper and get some pretty good feedback. It's better than universally good feedback, even if you have to kind of dig a little and withstand some dog shit.
I'm usually the one who fields our emails, and I may not be the right person for that because I really take it all to heart. I guess that makes the highs even higher, but those lows are pretty low. And I can't remember who, but someone described the App Store review process as being punched in the face while somebody holds your arms behind your back. And it really feels like that because, especially on the iOS App Store, you usually have no recourse, no way to track these down, no way to say, that's actually not true or anything like that. But sometimes you can, and I think that's a really good point in that if you actually use that to start a conversation, I think a lot of people send off an email not thinking there's a person on the other end, and as soon as you reply to it, in 99% of the cases, the tone gets a lot more civil, and more than half the time it probably turns into someone who ends up becoming a huge fan of the app, which is kind of shocking. But some of the biggest fans, I think, are the people who had some specific problem or some specific issue, and you get back to them, and all of a sudden, that's huge. So,
And as developers, you're actually not allowed to reply to any of those comments in the store itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, which is pretty bad considering that even newgrounds.com lets you reply. The worst Flash game, well, not the worst, but it's got a certain community that can be vile sometimes, but it still allows that discussion, which I think would be a pretty nice feature on the App Store.
So a neat thing on Android, and we have, we actually have a fairly large user base on Android, is you get a lot more data on who's purchasing your app, which was kind of a shock to us. In fact, users can elect whether or not they want to hide their email, but if they don't, you get name, email, city, zip code, all sorts of stuff like that. And especially when you're first launching or it's fairly easy to correlate a lot of reviews with actual user data. And I guess you can use that for whatever purposes you want. But in our case, when we first launched, we basically personally contacted anybody who left a bad review, anybody who refunded the app, and got feedback and tried to see if there were issues we could help people with. So, I mean, when you have the opportunity.
Okay, just over here.
For Sean, as an application developer and a game developer, is your time spent on games a worthwhile investment, or is it more just a labor of love?
It's definitely a labor of love, and I guess whether it's a worthwhile investment still is yet to be seen. With The Last Rocket, I'm just now starting to recoup the cost of development, and a lot of that is actually because of the sales of the developer diary that I released 6 months after the game came out. And so it's definitely a labor of love.
And will we see a Metroidvania?
Yes, we will.
Yes.
Hi, I'm a developer/designer. And then people like me constantly ask themselves, especially if they're doing their own thing, where do you stop doing your own and start outsourcing? But that's not my question. This is directed to the game developers. We live in the age of individual empowerment. I don't know how long will the days of big publishers like EA will last, because you can literally submit your own app store and have a runaway success. Have you guys considered publishers, or have used, or is using?
No, they're completely useless.
Completely
I'll
useless.
expound on that a little bit. It can be helpful to have a publisher, though not on the App Store. They're not very powerful, to be honest. It's way more effective to build your own personal fan base. Even if you take a hit in money on your first game or two, you're building that audience that you can use later to build your audience up a little more. It's just way better that way. Another thing is with like Chillingo and such, I'm pretty sure people on game review sites for iOS get a little tired of the whole Chillingo thing, because if you're publishing such a big selection of games, just by default, the quality of those games is going to fluctuate. So it's just way better to do your own stuff, I think.
Kepa, would you ever sell to Zynga?
I don't know why they'd want me. What do I got? A super difficult puzzle platformer series? And
I don't know, but what if they said that tomorrow they were releasing Hooks with Friends?
oh yeah, definitely. I'll sell for $300 million, make a new company, just let it burn for that amount of money.
Any other game guys?
I basically agree with Kepa that publishers can accelerate success but not cause it. So if your app was going to be successful, it probably will eventually be successful. It'll just take longer to have that happen. But like Chillingo has lots of successful apps. I don't know, I'm just using Chillingo because they're one of the most popular. They have lots of successful apps, but if you look at their catalog, they have ridiculous amounts of unsuccessful apps as well. But actually, one of the good things I have heard, like if you're just starting out, there's a huge problem, like what Kepa was talking about, with the fact that you don't have your brand there at all. People think that Chillingo made it. They have no clue that someone else made it. But one thing I have heard that is good that publishers do is at least some of them will actually kind of do their own approval process and go through your game and actually give you a lot of feedback that Chillingo specifically will turn it into a typical Chillingo game almost, and you'll end up with some physics puzzler or whatever that all their games seem to be these days. So, but I've heard from people that feedback they give is actually really successful and turn their game from something that it would have totally failed into something that did succeed, but I mean, their name isn't attached to it. So yeah, they may have made more money, but their next game, they're kind of starting from square one, really.
So I think your answer lies in looking at some of the successful Chillingo games and the sequels of those successful Chillingo games, and have they been published by Chillingo or by the developer themselves. So if you've had a good experience, you would probably want to repeat that, and if you didn't, you'll do something else next time. So I agree. With Matt, I think the idea of a publisher really should be kind of to help your game bloom. But the model as it's set right now, it just doesn't work because you're basically giving up a percentage for advertising in a way, because what the publisher does, that just taps into the current fan base to advertise your game, but that's a very expensive advertising if the game is successful. Now again, if it's not successful, yeah, you'll make a little more money than you would on your own, but it's not, that's not the goal. The goal is to sort of create a sustainable business of your own that keeps going, not that has 5 days of good sales and then dies.
Adding just a little bit to that, if a big publisher is going to dump ad money into your game, it's probably not going to do it until it's already showing signs of success. So it's just doesn't seem like a good deal. I did like Matt's idea of getting a publisher for one game and then ditching them now. That does seem pretty good.
And on this side?
I just wanted to get the panel's thoughts on the idea of having a time-limited trial of an app. So, having a full version of an app that expires in 24 hours or something like that. Do you think that would be beneficial to the ecosystem as a whole or harmful?
Now, Windows Phone already has this. They've got the trials inbuilt and they've got all the APIs there built in, then you can just literally flick a switch. You don't need to re-download the app or anything. It kind of acts like an in-app purchase. They're not time limited though. They are kind of like a permanent trial. Okay. And we don't do that ourselves, but the other developers I've spoken to say that really does work, and Microsoft preach about it all the time. So yeah, I think it could help, and it would certainly maybe clear up a lot of the clutter on the App Store of the free apps and the paid apps. The free apps are there for the demos. We've certainly got that, and it does work. But we'd like to have, one banner really instead of cluttering the App Store really.
There's a similar thing for games where there's one chapter you can play, and then the others are behind a paywall. And for some reason, I'm not quite sure what the exact reason is. People seem to hate this a lot, and it's a similar concept. So,
trials just seem like that's what you did on desktop, and like. When we were having trials, it was when we were buying $50 apps or $175 apps. So you obviously want to make sure that you're making a sound investment before you do it. For something like a 99-cent app or a $5 app, I don't necessarily feel like there's that much of a benefit to add that sort of thing in there. It's just, I think Apple could do a lot in terms of like offering more beyond just a couple screenshots to show an app. I'd love, like the Google Play Store allows people to embed videos of how the app functions. If they offered more in those ways, I think that's a lot more beneficial than just saying, all right, let's go and do what we did back in 1995 and add these trials to these apps, because it seems like the old way to do it, like file systems or something.
Since you set me up there by saying that this is stuff from the 80s, I'm going to say I really like it. And
what are you trying to say here?
What are you trying to say? No, anyway, so our app costs $10, so people are hesitant to buy it for that very reason. And the other thing is that it's not compatible with all configurations. You might have a special router installed by your IT department, and your phone can't talk to your computer, or you might have a firewall, or you might have just an incompatibility because of a particular GPU you've got on your computer. So we would love to have a chance for people to try out our stuff before finding out that it doesn't work. We beg Apple at every chance we get to give us trials.
Do you have a fear though that for those sort of specialist apps where it might just be something that you use once and then maybe again in 6 months, that people will download it just to use it that one time and then not actually pay for it?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be appropriate for all kinds of apps. In most cases, I think it would be a good thing. The fart app category would die if you could try it and laugh and be done.
Unless it was a really good fart app.
My comment is like in regard to like if it'll ever happen.
the App Store is like really successful, and I think Apple's philosophy on it is, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So I just don't see a lot of change coming to the App Store and like to help developers and things like that, as far as like paid upgrades and whatnot. I just don't think there's going to be any change until it's broken.
Okay.
Tom. Hi, my name's Adam. My question actually is related to outsourcing, which a few of you have mentioned. I'd just be really curious to hear from the few of you who've mentioned that you've used outsourcing for support or graphic design or anything like that. How'd you go about it? Did you go through any kind of formal channel? Did you just ask a mate? And even just on a more general level, could you comment on developer communities? Maybe, like I'm just getting started, so sometimes I wonder where to go on the internet to get more deeply involved with the developer community to help me get started. And I'll just add to that. Thanks, everyone. I've really enjoyed the day and your talks and everything. So,
thank you. For designers, a lot of it's word of mouth just by following people on Twitter. But if I'm looking for new talent, Dribbble is really great to find like up and coming designers who are just practicing their craft, but they're just doing it because they really want to get better at design and get critiques for it. So every now and then I'll find somebody that I've never heard of before that's posted like a really great like icon they made because they thought it would be cool on Dribbble. I'll contact them and say, hey, do you want to try to do some design work for me? I'll pay you and it can get you off the ground. So that's a really great way for that. For support, you can either find people that are really passionate about your product, or there are third-party services that do offer outsourcing support. That's what I use. Other people may have it in-house, I'm not sure.
Maybe I can comment on that. I think when you start your new apps, don't outsource anything. I think outsourcing is for optimizations of your business. It's not for inventing your business. So, yeah.
And to answer your question kind of on the getting involved, like back in the UK, we've got quite a few developer meetups in major cities, and I would just recommend just going along to as many as you can, and stay around for beers afterwards and get drunk, but meet lots of people here. It's the best thing you can do, really.
I would say don't outsource your secret sauce, whatever that is. If you've got a technology-based app, don't outsource that part because you won't own and understand the IP behind it. If your app is a game and you need somebody to do translations of some of the text, well, by all means. Or if you're doing a app where the design is, it's a let's say a Salesforce plugin kind of type app, and you don't care what the design is, outsource that. But in general, I don't know why I said that. Don't outsource the part that makes your app unique and that you need to really own.
So I guess my story about outsourcing is more cautionary. We were in a position where a company that I'm not going to name approached us and offered to pay us, essentially pay us the cost it would cost to hire a firm to port Pano to another platform. So they would pay for it, but they'd give us the money and then we'd hire the firm. And we went pretty far with the process. We were interviewing companies. One was based in Finland and one was, well, that kind of gives it away. Yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard to decide if that was something we wanted to do, and in the end we went against it, and I feel good about it. And part of it was we eventually found another app, a similar app. It was a photo app, and it might have been Camera Bag or something like that had done the same thing, and they seemed very happy with it, but when you looked at the reviews for the port, they were appalling. And for us, and I think I would guess for a lot of people up here, I mean, the brand you've built around your app and around your company and around you is one of the most valuable things you have. And I think, you really need to protect that. And, you might think, well, someone's going to pay for a free port, or in our case at least, or, this is just win-win, but there's a lot at stake there that you may not realize, and I think the damage to your brand could be significant. In terms of meeting people and socializing, I'm fairly antisocial. This is the first time I've really hung out with other iOS developers, so...
we know, we can tell.
So get invited to one of these, I guess, if you want to meet other people.
Hi, my name is Alex. Just two things. First, I would like to answer the question about StreamYard in Android. So you actually have like 1,000+ downloads per 10 days and 100.5 reviews, which is pretty good for Android store. Yeah.
Sweet.
And the second thing is just a question: what sort of advertisement do you all use, which is really works for you in terms of return of investments? If there are some.
Like advertising apps?
Yeah.
So I don't know about anyone else's experience, but I don't think advertising for apps works at all. Because with advertising, you almost need to be selling something expensive to recoup your costs, because the conversion rate is so low and apps are so inexpensive that the math just doesn't work out. The only exception to that may be things like spending exorbitant amounts of money buying like Touch Arcade rebrands and stuff like that. I don't know how well that works, but it's obviously more effective because it's a bit more targeted, but okay, so it's not. So even that is
What about $10 apps? The same thing?
No, even that is too
I think
low.
you need to be
probably.
much more expensive than that before it starts becoming worthwhile.
We've tried
really
it.
targeted.
We've tried it. You know, we're not expecting to get anything from that ad, but it creates awareness and people see it. And if there's an event and say there's a special edition of Macworld coming around when the new iPad comes out, we put an ad on the page 6 of Macworld magazine. It probably won't ever pay off, but we got a good price on it anyway.
I think the best advertising you can get is really focus on trying to be featured by Apple. The guys here, we've had it before, and it really does, it raises awareness, gives you great sales figures for a week. Yeah, just work on that, really focus. I can't tell you how, and none of us here really know how it happened, but we all just created something that we loved, and it happened, really.
Also, once you buy ad space anywhere, your email box is going to be just filled with a barrage of inquiries from other people who are trying to sell space, so watch out for that.
Okay.
It's kind of fun to do for ego reasons.
Thank you.
All right, the next question over here.
Hi, my name's John, and I'm just wondering, what do you guys think about the future of content creation on iPad? And specifically, I'm talking about actually making full-blown games and apps on the iPad and then later on extracting them and distributing them in the store. And I should preface that by saying I'm from Two Lives Left and we actually have a thing that does that, but I'm just wondering what your guys' opinions are on it.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I realized that earlier when the guy asked the question about what he'd like Apple to change. And I'm so glad you guys are here, because like the fact, and I know you guys have some struggles like constantly getting Codea approved and like trying to deal with just getting, I don't know if people have used it, it's fantastic, and it's like basically an IDE for making games on your iPad. And the fact that you guys have so many struggles just letting people transfer files and things like that. And obviously Apple's afraid that there's going to be some repository online where people can make whatever apps they want without having to go through the approval process, somehow running them in that or whatever. But I think that's kind of ridiculous. And the thing that kills me is we have all these creative apps on the App Store for doing like photo manipulation and audio stuff and whatever, and then all of a sudden you have like, most of us in the room are incredibly passionate about making interactive things, and you can't make those on Apple's device, like on all these devices right now without extreme restrictions, and I think that's incredibly sad. So I'm hoping that somehow with time we can, I don't know, Apple will change their mind on that and make it easier and easier to actually create apps and create games and create just cool interactive things on the iPad without being burdened with basically not being able to share your creations, and kind of just posting videos of them online and trying to explain to people how to make them work. It's sad.
So content creation for me really, like, it's a bad experience on the iPad a lot of times. So it's like I'd rather pull out my MacBook Air and work on, building an app rather than using that, app Codea, for which you can build iPad apps on the iPad. But I think of it a lot like the trackpad. When the trackpad first came out, like on a laptop, a PC laptop, it sucked to use, but at the same time, it was brilliant for like a laptop, right? I mean, it was really smart for a laptop, and so people would use it because it was, it made sense. But now, like, I will never go back to a mouse again, because Apple got it right. It progressed, it evolved. So now, like, the trackpad with the gestures and everything like that, it's brilliant. Like, it's so much better than a mouse ever was. So I see that happening. I see that the iPad will eventually, they'll get the controls right, to the point where like using the iPad is way more pleasant to use than, you know, a keyboard and mouse.
Cool. We'll take these last 3 questions and we'll wrap it up after that, but I'll jump to this microphone.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Adam's comment about the App Store being very successful and not being broken. I guess my view is that the App Store could be an awful lot better in terms of being a shopping experience. It's well below the level that you get out of buying something on Amazon, for instance. And I just wanted to get, I guess, your guys' opinions on whether or not you feel that the App Store could be better as a shopping experience and what it is. You know, what would be the big feature that you think would make things a lot better?
Discoverability would be awesome. Like Apple has this feature called a Genius, where like it based on what you've purchased before, it will show you new apps that I think you might like. But
yeah, but it's crap.
It's terrible. It's just god awful. Like I downloaded an app 9 months ago just because I needed it once, and it's still recommending me apps that are similar to it. Or I've downloaded a lot of text editors, so it must think I want to collect even more. Like they could do a lot in terms of discoverability. Search is not really that great. The rankings, it seems like that's pretty easy to game. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'd like to see refunds. They've got it in the Android store, and I think it might have a nice side effect that, we can't issue refunds on the Apple Store at the moment. And I think it may raise the price of some apps potentially and kind of bring the quality and the prices up, because people would be less afraid maybe to purchase maybe like Dave's $10 apps, because they know that if it really didn't do what they needed to do, they could get a refund. And if we've got a really unhappy customer, there are some kind of unofficial ways to get a refund. We see it on our sales reports. There are refunds. I don't know how they manage it, but they do. And we'd like that ability just to really do that. And I think everything could just raise up a little bit at the bar maybe.
I really don't want refunds for games, because that happens on Android, and I hear a lot of horror stories about that. So it's like, if you could do it somehow for apps and not games, maybe. But people can play a game for 24 hours and be totally satisfied and never need to play it again, and then go refund it.
Just for you and that.
I think something that's sort of both interesting and worrying is that, I mean, I've talked to some of the other people up here about this, and Apple seems to solve problems once they run into them themselves. They'll add an API once it becomes necessary for them. And so a lot of the stuff I think we'd like to see on the App Store, like discoverability, Apple doesn't have that problem with their apps on the store. And so I doubt that's as high a priority. On the other hand, I'm hopeful that now that they've done things like they've started releasing Pages and Keynote and things on the Mac App Store, they're eventually maybe going to run into that issue where, it's a couple years down the road and they're going to release a new version. Do they end of life that? What do they do for pre-existing customers? And maybe their pockets are deep enough that they'll just, give people free upgrades forever, which, we hopefully don't have to do. But I'm hopeful that at some point they're going to solve that problem for themselves, and then all of us developers will benefit.
So the way to look at it is Apple does not care about us whatsoever. So Apple has 2 priorities. One is Apple, so they do what is best for Apple, and 2, they do what is best for customers. We're just along for the ride, and we have earned the quote-unquote privilege to be in their store. I think that's how they kind of look at it. And in the case of like upgrading iWork or iLife, I think Apple will just completely eat the cost of that and just give free updates for that, because they can afford to. That's just a value add for them selling hardware, so they don't really need to make money off selling those software packages. For us, that sucks because it sets a precedent where they're wanting, then people are expecting, well, I've been getting free updates to iLife for 5 years, why can't I get free updates to your apps as well?
I think Apple's just very deliberate. So like they don't want to make rash decisions and then deal with like unforeseen consequences. Like I'm kind of the same way. I'm very, very hesitant. Like when I want to try something new, I have to think about, okay, it seems like a great idea because of, X, Y, and Z, but what about like, could it backfire, right? So could paid upgrades like really backfire badly? Could refunds really backfire badly and hurt developers? So it's like, it's working like really, really well. You have to admit, the App Store is super successful. So like, it makes me kind of nervous to hear like all these ideas. Like, what if Apple just, like willy-nilly implemented them, and then there's like these consequences that, unforeseen consequences that nobody guessed,
and it like screws us all. You know what I mean? So like I like that Apple's very deliberate about it. I think they do care a lot about developers. I think they care more about customers and themselves, but I've sensed that they do actually like really care, you know, try to take care of the developers as much as they can.
And over here.
Hi, my name is Adrian. I'd be interested to find out a bit more about how much time you spend on marketing versus product development, and whether you do marketing as sort of an ongoing thing or only around sort of major releases.
So we have 12 people, and I'm the only one that does anything with marketing, but most of my time is spent being a sort of product designer, or working with product designers and coordinating teams. So I'd say maybe a 30th of our time is spent on marketing.
What is marketing? I mean, I always have these hopes and aspirations of doing it, but as a one-man shop, it's really hard to kind of find time to do that. And I've always figured that the best marketing I have is making my product better. Sure. And if my product is better, people are going to tell other people about it, and that's going to go a lot further than any sort of kind of PR blitz I could do like halfway through a dev cycle. Usually, like, I do have the luxury of like when I put out a major point release, I have some relationships established with like publications where I'm pretty sure they're going to write about it, but that's all just from like building my name and getting it out there and them actually being fans of the product.
Right. From my point of view, the type of skills you use to do, you know, whatever marketing you're doing, they seem very different from the development skills. So I've often used that as sort of like a release valve. Like you get really burnt out from working on technical problems, and you take a break and you know, work on that side of things. I should note, and we talked to other developers, and some of whom didn't do this, but we found, you know, what is so key if you're going to do that, if you're going to, you know, try to get somebody to write about you or things like that, as much of that stuff as you can get to coincide as possible is huge. And a lot of people, you know, they might have a write-up, and it might be big, it might be on Gizmodo, but it might be before the release, or it might be all these different things. And I think if you don't get that timing right, then it all misfires. But on the other hand, if you can get it great, and you can get, you know, Gizmodo to write about you, right as Apple's doing a feature in the store, and all these things, then it has this real additive effect. And so that, I think, is really, really key to do.
I just do two things as a game developer. The first thing is that when we have the early prototype of the game, I like to think about what the final trailer would look like, because I think that's helpful. And the second thing is when the game's submitted, we put the submit date, everyone might know this trick already, but the submit date is like a month or two past when they'll actually approve it. And so that'll give us like a 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3-week period where we can get out the promo codes to every game website that we can. And that gives us extra time. It lets the reviewers slowly review it at their own pace. It's pretty handy.
Thanks.
I got one comment on the marketing. So making the product better, sure, is a really great way to reach more people. But it's also just making the product better. And really so I guess when you make your product better, it's really hard to hit this exponential growth. And product design is a really interesting thing to do, but what also is really interesting is basically figuring out design distribution and figure out how that works with your product. And that's kind of a new way of marketing, how I look at it. So marketing, you know, the telemarketers or ads, etc. That's not really interesting anymore. But figuring out, basically designing distribution is probably even more interesting than designing product. For example, Dropbox, when they, you know, had this feature where if you make a friend sign up, you get some more space. That's excellent distribution design, or call it marketing, but that's the kind of thing you want to do.
And the final question.
Hi, my name is Simeon, and I have a question for the paid productivity app developers. It touches upon something discussed just before. Do you think that paid software upgrades, like as monolithic upgrades, will go extinct because of the way the App Store doesn't allow them? Or do you think Apple will eventually allow them in the future as a way to sort of reward your loyal customers with a cheaper upgrade path? Or do you think these things can be handled through in-app purchase?
I think Apple will add paid upgrade at some point, and not because of the sort of $10 iWork apps, but because of Final Cut Pro and the Mac App Store and some of the more expensive apps that they've got. They'd probably love to see Microsoft Office apps on the Mac App Store, but until they're paid upgrades, it's just not going to happen, and they know that. Same thing with I guess there's Photoshop for the iPad now, but not for the Mac, right? And they'd probably love to see the whole Creative Suite moved over. So I would expect them to handle that. In the meantime, there are things you can do. You can take the Tweety path and just make a new app and apologize for the folks who had version 1 and move on. It's not ideal.
It's more complicated than it looks, because if you do a paid upgrade to version 2, well, what if you need to fix something in version 1? So that makes it really hard to submit. Then you have to submit a version to the App Store that's less than version 2 that fixes version 1, because you can't just tell people yeah, well, you bought version 1, but you got to pay $2 extra to get your bug, this bug fix or whatever. That's sort of like an Adobe thing to do. So it's complicated, I think, and so I think Apple's maybe trying to work that out, but it's not as simple as it sounds.
I'll just follow up that one solution for us, and we're really looking at it, but we haven't done it yet, is to do subscription. To have a free app or to have the purchase of the app handle only the first year of online access or something, and then have an annual recurring revenue stream. Then we don't need a paid upgrade at that point. We just keep upgrading for free because you have to pay for the service.
Anyone else? All right, well, we will wrap it up there then.